Much for being here today. As you see the agenda, you see that we kind of have a packed 2 hours, and hopefully an exciting and energizing 2 hours. We won't have a break, so feel free to get up, and the restrooms are through that door there at any time, and there are all kinds of goodies over here, and we want to thank Scott Google for being in charge of the We are live streaming this event, so if you and recording it. So if you have a question, feel free to use your outside voice, so that perhaps that excellent mic will pick that up. We designed this workshop very differently than the one we did before, which was primarily about being very attentive, but also a lot of de-escalation training. And that will probably come up in our discussions, but really want to welcome Brad Burns, Julie Niemchick, and Mike Wierenga, all of whom come with a significant amount of experience and skill in safety issues. And today, obviously, we're talking about church safety issues, but church safety issues are not much different than other safety issues, right? So we have made some pretty serious strides here at St. Mark's, thanks to a number of people here on our safety team. We have a ways to go, as I think we probably all do, but we wanted to share with you, as we said early on, that there would be a copy of our safety manual, which Brad Burns was very much instrumental in helping us craft. And Julie Niemchick, who did an outstanding crime prevention assessment, to share both of those documents with you. For those of you joining us online, if you wish to have copies of those, I can send them digitally. My email address is christianb@stmarksgr.org, stmarksgr.org. I'd be happy to send those to you. So all three come with a significant amount of experience in safety. They also work together, have worked together in many other workshops, so a really dynamic team representing some very diverse elements of safety and security, which have become so much a part of our life, and certainly here at St. Mark's, as even a year ago we use only one entrance to come in, and which is a national standard now, and particularly a safety one. We hire DAK security, both on Saturday for the Breakfast Cafe, and then two on Sunday, doing what we can to make sure that parishioners feel that they are tended as best as possible, and that we have provided as safe an environment as possible. So thank you again for being here. Do feel free to come up and get some things if you wish, and let us pray together. Good and gracious God, you call us from various parts of the greater Grand Rapids community. You have brought us together, and we have responded to that call. As we continue to respond to the gospel call to be people of love, compassion, justice, and mercy, we ask you to open our minds and our hearts to the knowledge you would have us learn this day. We ask you to bless Brad and Julie and Mike as they speak to us words of wisdom and words about safety that can guide us and lead us as we do our best in our churches to keep people safe from harm. Be with us, send your Holy Spirit upon us to guide us and to lead us, and to keep our minds open to so many things that we are going to learn this morning. Through all of these things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. So thank you, and we will go ahead and start with Brad. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Brad Burns. I think you've got the agenda, some of my information written in the back of that. I'm going to be speaking about St. Mark's Policy and Procedure Manuals, something I've pulled off a copy of. I'm going to try to slip through that pretty quickly. and touch on some of the minor, more important points. Just to have some background on me, I'm the owner of Safe Church Security Group. That's a company that does consulting, security training, and also event security for places of worship here in Michigan. I'm also the executive director of the West Michigan Church Security Network, which is a network that all of you are invited to be part of if you're interested. It's a network of people like us who are responsible for safety and security for our places of worship. It's a group where we can speak to each other. We meet 3 times a year. We can meet with each other. We can share information, resources, and hopefully help each other do our jobs. We also do an annual seminar with the Kent County Sheriff's Department, and our next seminar is going to be October 22nd. That's open to the public. Seating is limited, but you're certainly welcome to check that out. And that information is on the website of the West Michigan Church Security Network. I'm a safety and security director for a multi-site church, and have done some speaking before for Kent County, Iowa, Perry County, as well as a little louder. Thank you. As well as Walker Police Department. So again, I'm going to go through the manual. And I think Father Christian would like you to hold your questions till after all 3 of us have spoke, so that all those questions can be answered at that time. Won't distract me, so I lose track of time and get out of place. Today I'm going to speak about their policy and procedures manual, providing examples of why this is important for your church. Written policies will be extremely helpful to you, to your church leadership, to your safety teams, so that everybody is on the same page when you determine how you're going to react to certain responses, how you're going to deal with certain incidents, and that makes everybody much more likely to know what the other person is going to be doing. The first part in the manual, if you're following through that, is about the mission. This describes the purpose, the management, and the scope of your policy and your safety team if you are able to put one of those together. And again, everybody should agree on those policies and procedures. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to work this out. Going through the policies and procedures, keys, which is one of my orders anytime I talk to the church. Keys, I would suggest you keep keys that people have in your ministry and in your church to a minimum. It's astounding how many churches I talk to who have keys out there for people who don't go to church anymore, or are not volunteer any longer. One of the worst things to try to maintain security is to have keys floating around out there you don't have control over. So that's something to take into consideration when you start handing those out. Door locks. I know we are a church and we're open to everyone, but it's extremely difficult to maintain security, especially if you're on a Sunday when you're having a service when all the doors of your churches are open. And activity doors near your kids' area, in the back of the church. This is always a struggle for church to agree to start locking doors. That's something that should definitely be taken into consideration. The next subject is surveillance cameras. Surveillance cameras can be expensive, but they also can be very, very helpful. Certainly after the fact, if you have some type of incident or theft. I know I've used them at my church on multiple occasions. Because of the cost, I would suggest that you start small and continue to add to that every year, so that at some point down the road you have a good portion of your church and your parking lot covered with surveillance cameras. There's a lot of things you're going to pick up on there that may be needed, especially when it comes time to providing reports to police departments of certain incidents that have happened in your church. First aid equipment. Mike can probably talk a little bit more about that, but first aid equipment is very important. I know when I first started at my church, they had not even one AED in the building and no medical bag at all. I know St. Mark's here has come a long ways. They're up to 2 AEDs now, especially with the multi-story facility. Having more than one of them is quite important. When it comes to heart attack, an AED is extremely important, even though here at St. Mark's, you're probably no more than 3 or 4 blocks away from the fire department, and the responses may be quicker. That first 5 to 10 minutes is extremely important, and an AED can easily save someone's life if you have that. You may never use it, but it's there. Emergency shutoffs, that's something else. We're talking about natural gas. It's good for you to know where that emergency shutoff is, just in case there's ever an emergency with gas. Whether it's a stove or a furnace or whatever, you really should have some idea, certainly your safety team, where that is located. Children's ministry check-in and check-out. Just so you know right off the bat, my passion is children's ministry, and I cannot imagine anything more devastating to me and my church than to have something happen to one of our kids. Certainly your check-in procedures, your check-out procedures, I like to see that formatted. I know you may have, some churches may only have 2 or 3 kids. That's a little different situation than a church such as ours, that we may have 200 children during one service. You should have, and I would certainly recommend, some type of equipment in place so that when that child is brought into your kids department, that child maybe has a tag on it with its information on it, the parent has a tag, and the kid's leader has a tag, so that when it comes time for that child to be picked up, all 3 people know who that child is supposed to go to. We're going to talk about an incident a little bit later on. But your ministry, children's ministry check-in and check-out procedures should be something that's top priority with you. The offering and collection. If you're going to get robbed, that'd probably be the one place that's going to happen during the service when you're picking up and handling your offering and collection. So I would recommend that you consider how you do that, where you do it, who's doing it. I would certainly recommend that there's always 2 people involved with your collection. There should never be just one person doing that. That's for the protection not only of the person carrying it, but for the church as well. So that's something when you're looking through this manual should consider as well. It's also a good reason to have surveillance cameras. I would suggest that you never, ever fight somebody trying to grab your offering. I would suggest you want them out of that building as quick as possible, and if you have to open the door and shove them out, that's fine. Do not fight with that. You have no idea what's going on in their head, what their capabilities are of causing damage to your congregation. I would suggest you do not put up a fuss. That money's not that important, it can be replaced. A lot of churches are checks now or even done online. So I would caution your offering people to put up no fuss when if that ever did occur. Bomb threats, suspicious packages, backpacks, biohazard cleanup. I'm going to try to address all those at one. I would definitely suggest you have a policy for each of those, how you're going to respond. Bomb threats are probably not something that you're going to run into, but if that did happen, I would certainly suggest you take it seriously. I would suggest you immediately evacuate the church and call 911. Do not try to solve a bomb threat on your own. I know as many people as I have working with me at our church, there's no way we're going to deal with a bomb threat. We're going to call 911 and evacuate the building. Probably the same for suspicious packages. if we have something delivered, whether it's on Sunday or during the week when you're here in the office, if it's something you have no idea what it is, and you have some concern, especially here in Grand Rapids, I would call the police department and have to inspect it. I have a policy in our church that we do not inspect suspicious packages. I did that once, and I'm not doing it again. Nothing happened, but I wasn't excited about doing it. Backpacks, that's going to be a personal preference of you and your church. I'm not excited about seeing backpacks in the church. I do our best not to have that, especially in the worship center. Now, as a parent, when they get a child in one hand and a backpack in the other, that's not a yellow flag for me. But people walking in backpacks, it's certainly something to be concerned about to some degree. Especially downtown Grand Rapids, I know there's probably a lot of people, if you have homeless people, they're most likely going to have a backpack. I would suggest that you do that somewhere outside of the worship center. But again, that's something you're going to have to take a look at and make a decision on your own. Biohazard cleanup. Definitely something I don't want to get involved in. We're talking about somebody, for most likely somebody throwing up, vomiting somewhere in your church. There are rules and procedures for that. You should know what those are. If it happens in your child's classroom, I would suggest you evacuate that classroom until that's taken care of. And I would do the same thing for if a child has a bloody nose, or there's blood involved, especially if it's in the kids' area. Again, I would evacuate that room until that's cleaned up. And you personally should take that blood seriously when you're responding to try to help somebody with medical. Hopefully you've got medical gloves in your carry bags, your medical response bags. Might be something that's very difficult to remember at the time, but I would suggest you have that as well. And then in regards to the policies and procedures, the last one here, and I'm not going to hit this very hard, is the weapons policy. Again, I would suggest you do have a weapons policy that's preferential based on your church, your beliefs, your understanding of what could potentially be involved there. If you have a weapons policy, your safety team is going to know how to respond. You're also going to know how to respond if you need to call 911 for some reason. In Michigan, it is not illegal for somebody with a concealed pistol license to carry openly in a church. On the other side of that, it is illegal for somebody to carry concealed in a church if they're carrying concealed. Don't ask me why, it doesn't make sense. They probably never will. I don't think anybody on both sides of the aisle is going to get together on that one. But if somebody has a CPL, they are able to walk into a church carrying openly. You as a church have the ability to decide if that's okay or not. Your church is private property. Unless your church is meeting in a school, your church is private property. You make the rules for your church and anywhere on your property. So I'm not going to try to persuade you one way or the other, but that's a decision you should know that you have, and should have a policy in place so you know how to deal with it. So that's policies and procedures. I'm going to head to emergency action plans now, if you're following along. The emergency action plans are put in place, again, so that everybody on the team, administration, knows how to do it, how to proceed, how to respond, and how to do it properly before the emergency happens. And we're going to talk about different particular responses, but it's extremely important for everybody to be on the same page for that. Probably the number one thing that you should take into consideration is training. If you don't train, you're not going to perform well during emergency response. You're going to be under duress, your heart rate's going to go up. There's all types of things that could happen to you, but if you haven't trained for it, it's going to be very difficult to respond properly. Training is probably the most important thing for your team to perform. Medical emergencies. A medical emergency, in my opinion, is going to be the most likely emergency response here in your church. I can't count the amount of medical responses we've had at our church. We have 3 different facilities, and every one of them has at one time or other had multiple medical emergencies. Some of the reasons the AED is important and the medical bags are important. The police department, fire department, EMS, they're all going to respond after you call them as quickly as they can. But even here, I would say they're going to be minutes away. Quite possibly here it could be less than that. But certainly if you're not inside the city like this, they're going to be 5 to 10 minutes away, and the ambulance may be even longer than that. So you guys, if you put a team together, are going to be the first responders. And you need to take that into consideration. You need to train for that on both the use of the AED, on CPR, and certainly first aid. If you have medical professionals in your congregation, doctors, nurses, EMS personnel, obviously those are great people to have part of the team. They might not always be there, but when they are there, they're going to be certainly the best in response to those type of situations. As much training as I have, I still do not want to be the medical guy when we respond. I want to be the guy controlling the whole situation and have people who are actually professionals involved. EMS the best, firefighters, emergency room nurses and doctors, by far those are the best people to have involved. I would suggest you look for what you have available to you in your church. Severe weather. Tornadoes are probably most likely. In Michigan now, most likely, if there is a tornado, it's going to be in your area. It's not county-wide anymore. Typically, when there's a tornado, it's only a section of the county. And you need to act quickly. You need to get people to cover. And you have to, prior to that, you have to have a place of cover. You need to know where your sheltered areas are. Your church congregation needs to know where your sheltered areas are. And your children's leaders, and who's ever involved in your kids' area needs to know where those are before a situation happens. I actually watched our church here in Grand Rapids after the recent tornado a year or two ago. It was on a Wednesday evening. And I don't know exactly where, but somewhere over here right by the expressway did a lot of damage. I went back and looked at the video to see how we reacted to that. And we had a number of people sitting around in chairs in a circle with the pastor talking about whatever they were talking about. I watched all of them pick all their phones out of their pockets, obviously getting their tornado warning. And then I watched them take 5 minutes to put the chairs back in a straight line. We had a conversation about that, and I was obviously distressed to see that. They're at the top floor, less than a mile away from where this all occurred. So those need to be taken seriously. Dangerous person attacks. Not just active shooters, but dangerous person attacks. And this could involve somebody with a weapon or even without a weapon, in my opinion. You should have policy in place how you're going to respond to that. And if there's a weapon involved, that's going to be extremely difficult. Even if you have an armed team, that's still going to be extremely difficult to deal with. Police response, again, they're going to get there as quick as they can as soon as you start calling them. But for the most, they're going to be 5 to 10 minutes away. So again, you're the ones that have to figure out how you're going to deal with that for those first 5 to 10 minutes. So again, you need to take that one seriously. I would suggest you have a meeting specifically on that, in that regard, so that you as a whole, your team as a whole, can get people such as Mike or myself or Julie, somebody involved that can help you determine what the best way is for your particular church. Facing an armed suspect, again, is extremely difficult. Somebody's likely going to get hurt. All you may be able to do is minimize that, protect as many people as you can get locked somewhere else. Missing children and persons. We used to talk a lot just about missing children, but do you have any adults in your facilities that may have dementia, or things of that nature? I know from personal family situation that they can easily become lost within a very close proximity to where you are. You should have a child abduction policy and procedure in place. Again, I think you should put a lot of thought into that process, putting that together. And this isn't something that may happen, this is something that does happen. Kentwood, a church in Kentwood, a number of years ago, had a child, I don't remember how old the child was, but she was abducted right out of that church's child's ministry area during the service. That child was taken by the female abductor, taken to her home. She cut her hair, changed her clothes, and she was back in her bags. And the only thing that saved that child was the church's cameras. They had surveillance cameras. The law enforcement, in this case the county, was there. They were able to review the cameras with somebody who recognized this lady. And I believe within 3 hours, the county was at her door and getting that child back. I cannot imagine what that church would have gone through, or what that family would have gone through, had they not had those cameras. Because she could easily have been long gone, and that child never seen it. You as a church, when you take these children into your custody, have a huge responsibility. Your kids leaders need to know that, and you need to know that. But once they're there, their responsibility is yours. So I would, for sure, spend a lot of time on that particular policy. Another one here is child abuse. You should have a specific policy on that. You should know what you should and should not do during a child abuse or a suspected child abuse situation. From experience through training, I know that you should not be talking to the potential abuser. You should not be talking to the child. You should get their parents involved, get them with their parents, separate the two, keep the other person, the potential abuser, keep track of them if you can. You should not start asking questions. You want law enforcement to do that. They know how to do that, and they know how to do that without influencing the potential court case down the road. So that's something else you need to take into consideration. I recently spoke at a church group meeting about a child, 12-year-old girl. I do my best not to get messed up here because this stuff affects me terribly. This 12-year-old girl was abused by a 25-year-old man at her church, a man that her parents knew, all the staff members, the pastor, the parents of the abused child knew. They even knew of his history in Grand Rapids 5 years prior, where he did the same exact thing. and spent time behind bars for it. Thankfully, this guy is in prison now. His sentence is 5 to 30 years. I personally prayed for 30 years. He did it twice. He's going to do it again. Unfortunately, people that are involved in child abuse do not seem to change their stripes. Another reason we're going to talk a little bit briefly about background checks. The last thing under that topic is emergency relocation, gathering places. If you have a fire, you have some type of emergency where there's an evacuation, you should know ahead of time. The parents should know ahead of time where their kids are going to be so that they can come and find them afterwards. I would still suggest you have your pickup and drop-off policy still in procedure. You don't release children until everybody's in the same area. Your leaders know they have all of their kids. But there should be somewhere, either on your property or nearby, where everybody knows where they're going to go to pick up their children. Safety team. Part of why you're here today, hopefully, is to help you to develop and put together a safety team. About safety team security, I like to call it safety team. Our particular safety team involves security, medical, and in our case, at one of our facilities, park. But a safety team is something that, again, hopefully if you haven't started one, you're going to consider putting one of those together. You can't do any of this really effectively without a safety team. And that may be one person every week, hopefully a different person at least every other week or every week of the month. I will suggest that not everybody in your congregation is qualified or should be qualified to be on your safety team. Everybody has their talents, and some people have absolutely no talent to be on a safety team. That's something you'll have to determine through your process of interviews and applications. Hopefully you'll put together an application form. I believe there's one in the back of St. Mark's manual, and something to that effect, so that you can better do a job of interviewing them, checking their background. I would look at things of such as their commitment to the church. I certainly wouldn't put somebody that's been in your church for just a month as part of that team. Their lifestyle, their experience, and their age. I do have a guy on my team that's 80 years old. He's still good to be there. Hopefully I'm in good shape as he is when I meet. That doesn't mean just because you're old you can't be part of the group, but certainly age and youth will diminish your experience, capabilities, and things of that nature. I would suggest nobody under 18 be part of that team as well. Background checks are a must, and I would suggest national background checks, not just the inexpensive iChat you can get off the state website. People don't all live in Michigan their whole life, so you have no idea at state check what they may have been involved in other states. I would also warn that a background check doesn't mean that they're not a potential issue. Background checks only tell you if they've been caught, and if they've been arrested, and if they've been prosecuted. It won't tell you about the typical child abuser who has done at least 40 to 100 situations of child abuse before he was caught. So don't take those as a only safety check. Check their background, check references, check their friends. Do your due diligence there on making sure this is one of the proper people for your team. And also don't think that just because you make them part of your team that you can't unmake them part of your team. Another thing that's extremely important, at least in my opinion, on a safety team member, is confidentiality. Certainly in medical situations that you're going to respond to, confidentiality is required. Anything you find out during a medical response about that individual, history or whatever, is extremely important for your church, your team to keep that confidential. That's not to be shared with others, that's not to be shared out at a gathering talking about the situation or telling somebody how good of a job you did. That's confidential information just as much as anything else. That's a father, priest, or reverend is going to talk to somebody about. You have to keep that confidential, and your people have to do the same. And I would say the same for your training. Training procedures, anything that your safety team is going to learn, and not necessarily the policy and procedure manual, but specific responses, especially in regards to security. That should be for your team to know, church administration to know, and nobody else. Last thing we're going to talk about here are positions and duties. There are going to be specific areas in your church, your place of worship, where people are going to be posted. The most important one I can think of is your children's ministry. We will always have somebody from our security team at our children's ministry, and that is if we only have one person there today. That person's going to be in the ministry. We're not going to cover the worship center. We're not going to cover the doors and exits. We're going to cover the children's ministry. After that, then yes, I look at the entrances, and the exits, and the worship center. Most likely the worship center is going to be where you're going to have a disturbance. I don't know how controversial Father Christian can get, but some people seem to think to come into a worship center and disturb it, whether it's under protest or even perhaps attacking somebody. That's probably their primary place where they're going to go. You need to know as part of your policy how you're going to respond to that, who's going to respond to that, who's going to protect, whether it's Father Christian or who's ever up on stage, how you're going to deal with that situation as well. And again, all this should be in written policy so everybody understands it. On that note, it is against the law in Michigan to disturb a worship service. So they've already broken the law. Whatever situation happens at my church, if there's a disturbance in the worship center, one of us is automatically calling 911 to get them responding. We'll deal with removing them if you need to do that. We'll deal with trespassing once the law enforcement gets there. But you need to call, in a lot of these situations, medical response, I would call 911 right away. Anything that you feel your security team needs to get involved in, it's a dangerous situation, potentially dangerous situation, I would call 911 right away. So that's the positions and duties. The positions and duties. The last thing I'm going to talk about here is the equipment for the safety team. I would suggest some type of ID, whether that's a lanyard with a badge on it. Some people like to have shirts that say safety team, or jacket that everybody knows that's part of the safety. Something that readily IDs those people. I know if I'm laying on the ground and somebody starts going after me for a medical response, I want something to tell me that they're somebody that should be doing it. If I see a badge or they ID themselves, that's extremely helpful in a medical response. Radios, I would suggest, if at all possible, everybody have radios, preferably with a earpiece that goes directly to the radio so everybody can't hear what's going on. And you're going to spend $100, $150 on that per unit, and probably another $50 on the earpiece. But that lets everybody know what the other person's doing. And if somebody's in the back of the church and there's a problem back there, they're not isolated. They've got the rest of the team who can help respond to that. Cell phone, I think almost everybody today has a cell phone. If you got to call 911, you don't want to search for the office phone. You want to be able to go right where you're at. flashlight, small pocket style. I'm guilty of not having mine on me today, but it's daylight. Just a small pocket style will work wonders. Every single one of our facilities, if the lights go out, the worship center is completely dark. One of our facilities, 2 of them, have backup lights, one of them doesn't. You're no help as a safety team if you don't have a flashlight. And then the last thing I would suggest is a notepad and pen. There's going to be opportunities, plenty of them, when you respond to take down medical information, people's names, child's descriptions, car license plates, whatever. Unless you've got 100% better memory than I do, you're not going to remember most of that incident occurs. So please make that part of your policy as well. And with that, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. We apologize for not having a mic here. I know that it's a little bit difficult for some people to hear. If you would like to move to be a little bit closer, that might be helpful. We are in transition here to install a new sound system, complete new sound system in this space, so we apologize for that. For the parishioners who are here, many of the things that Brad talked about, we have actually accomplished. And because for those of you online, because we are a downtown church and have had instances, not the least of which was very recently, when all of the statuary in the St. Mary's Garden, which is a secure space, was severely damaged by an intruder. So we're well aware of some of our needs, and that also prompted us to order 5 additional cameras for the building inside and out. So we have any number of cameras in the building and any number of cameras around the building as well. And that point can't be stressed more, because had we had a second camera in the garden, we could have arrested that individual. So 1 is being installed now, so there actually be 2 or 3, I guess, in the garden now. So I want to introduce Judy Freeman, who's sort of, she and Tom Walker, my partners in crime for today's event. She has some important information to share with you.
Thanks so much, Christian. I just wanted to be able to announce that we were able to do this work thanks to the Whittemore Foundation. It was prior to COVID that we wrote a grant to Whittemore that allowed us to do the work with Brad and get this plan written. And we wanted to bring that, we said at the time that we wrote the grant that we would bring that to the diocese. We wanted to be able to share what we learned with all the Episcopal churches in the diocese. So there are other copies of this plan if you'd like to take a few more to the people that you work with. As you could tell, there's a lot to this work. You know, this really needs to go in front of every ministry and be at the vestry for discussion. Implementation takes a really long time. And it's not that everybody will have the same plan, but you can take parts and pieces that you learn from our plan and use what you think is appropriate. Also, we're sharing our resources with you, our valuable resources, so you will know who to call on when you want to do the work as well. With that, we'll introduce Julie Niemchick from the police department, who helped us with this valuable church assessment report. Thanks, Julie.
Familiar faces that I've seen already, and I appreciate you inviting me to be here. Just to kind of give you a little background on me, I was a community organizer for Roosevelt Park Neighborhood Association, which is located on Granville Avenue, now Cesar Chavez. I was there for 31 years up until 5 years ago. So I have a lot of experience in working in neighborhoods that deal with a lot of different variety of problems and issues. And then coming inside the police department, I continue that crime prevention expertise that I gained at Roosevelt Park, working alongside and trained by the police department. I think they kind of felt like they already knew me, felt they could trust me, and working with all the communities around the city, thought that was a great fit. I'm really glad we thought that. So I really enjoyed working with them through the years and continue to help them as well. Also, in my journey as now an adult, I grew up in ministry. My dad was in ministry for many years, all my whole adult childhood. And so I have seen through the years the evolution of us changing from being just, our doors are open. I mean, how many remember? The doors were open, our home was open. How many of you leave your keys in the car, on the seat, out in wherever you live? And we just never worried about that, right? Our doors were unlocked. Our neighbor kids came in and out. I mean, I grew up that way. But as time has changed, not to say that those terrible things were happening, and they were happening in our churches, in our houses of worship, no matter what denomination. We have seen that now it is important for churches, houses of worship, to take their heads out of the sand to say that it's not going to happen here. And we've been, it's been all over the news of things that we have seen happen within our churches. And it's not just active shooter stuff. It is domestic, estranged spouses, family members, mad at somebody, and using that opportunity to go to the church where they know that people are gathering to cause disruptions. Mental health issues have risen. And so that's another area in which we're having to deal with and be prepared for. So a lot of things have changed since we just kind of did nothing. And vetting our volunteers, etc. And so that's how my work in working with the police department, working in the neighborhood, I was able to come under some good instruction and certification in SEPTED. And what is SEPTED and why is it important? SEPTED is crime prevention through environmental design. It helps to design your house of worship, your home, your community to try to out-design crime, from deterring crime from coming into your neighborhood. It's a great tool recognized to help deter criminal activity, reduce the fear of crime, and increase the perception of safety. The principles are used to make the house of worship, business, and even your home less targeted. SEPTED assessments look at your locks, your landscaping, your lighting, and it looks at safety policies. We provide you with where you are most vulnerable, okay? And then provide suggestions in which we can help you create a different atmosphere and create that safety plan. And it can keep your staff safe, not just your parishioners. I mean, we look at ways in which your staff during the week is safe in the premises. And so we are so excited about being able to help you here with that. And those that are from Grand Rapids, within the city of Grand Rapids, I'm able to help you. Even if you live in the city of Grand Rapids and you want something at your home, I'm able to do that as well. We can't guarantee that you won't be a victim of crime or that all the suggestions that we put in place are going to keep you from being targeted, as Pastor Christian has brought up, that they were, after this whole thing, then you had an incident. So even though we give you the suggestions and you may implement every procedure and practice that's necessary to keep you safe, you still may be. So we just want you to know that that is not a guarantee. Here are some principles that SEPTED covers. And they should be laid out in your plan or have some separate process in which I go over with you or someone in another law enforcement agency, such as the county, can help you put together, okay? The first principle is natural access control. This is like a natural way of letting people know who's in control of your property. This is signage, your driveway, going into the property, how it's laid out, your sidewalks, everything that's guiding someone, lets someone know where they need to be going and where they should not be going. One example in which you could say, okay, you've got it really laid out, it's very celebrated entrance so that you know that this is where I enter. Okay, this is the main entry to where I go. We have other entrances throughout churches that it's more convenient, so I go in this entrance. But we want the abnormal, we call them, user, or someone who's not familiar, to know exactly where you want them to enter from, okay? This also can be done in a form of, if you have A-frame signs, and you want to prevent people from coming in a certain area, or at least let them know this is not an entrance. It's closed, it's locked, okay? You could put those out at different times, depending on how large your house of worship is. That's all dependent on that. So those are some areas in which you could use that. Again, the celebrated entrance, just letting people know where the main entrance and where you want them to come into. Territorial, second one, territorial reinforcement. This shows the ownership by way of fencing, landscaping, fences, and we use this a lot where even in your greeters, this is also a territorial reinforcement. Someone even in your parking lot that's just there to help greet people as they're coming into the place before they even enter the building. That this sends a signal to someone that, oh, they're kind of paying attention to what's going on out here. Everything, and Mike can attest, Brad, that every incident of a bad situation begins in the parking lot. And so if we have someone out there that can actually help deter that from even entering into the building, the better. A lot of churches, well, you'll see if you drive around, will have a vehicle that has security written on the side, like those magnets they just throw on. That's one example. Just having someone out there that greets people as they're coming in. Bigger churches are having the drive around carts, the golf carts, and picking people up to bring them in. Those are the first line of defense for your building, to see and be the eyes for what's going on outside before coming in. Number 3, your natural surveillance. Surveillance cameras inside and out, but also having a way of seeing outside. You have some windows that you can actually see onto the parking lot, onto the sidewalk, out front, out back. These are important places in which to keep things from obstructing it, so that you actually have a visual out, so that you can see all the way across. We look at landscaping again, because we want to make sure landscaping isn't keeping you from being able to see clearly and having this natural surveillance that goes right across your parking lot and all across your property. And one thing I want to go back to is the territorial, with having your greeters inside being one of those ways. We want to make sure that people understand, remain ministry minded with a safety focus. So we want to be that friendly face, we want to be that person that greets and welcomes people, but we also want to remember, we want to also to keep our eyes on what is not normal, or what is out of normal for us. And if we have a question, then we ask someone else on our team. Does that seem not very good to you? Does that feel uncomfortable? Because we all have a spirit within us that gives us that, I don't know if this is right. Never second guess it. Just give it confirmation, okay? So always go with what's in here, and when something's telling you that does not feel right, and then get your confirmation from someone else. That, yeah, you know what, I think you're right. I think it's not a good situation. And then through your policies and procedures, then go with that, okay? Your parking lots and your playgrounds with the natural surveillance, too, is that you want to make sure that if you have a playground area specific, that there is a way of keeping an eye on that, okay? If you don't have it fenced in, that you have some kind of landscaping or something that designates where this area is. It doesn't make it easy for someone to just run in and run back out, okay? And that you have people on that playground that are keeping an eye on it, that you have people. Your 4th is safety plan. That's why Brad's here and helping you with that, making sure that there's something in place. The staff, again, the staff and volunteers, that are working your safety team, they know what these are, that they are up to date with those things. The fifth is access control. Who has the keys? You talked about that briefly. Keys go out everywhere. Everybody's always been so trusting. Oh, John, Joan, oh, this team, that ministry, they all have keys. They're all wandering around somewhere. Nobody has a clue where they're at or who has returned them. That needs to be addressed, and you guys are doing that. So that needs to be a part of that as well. We've got way too many things going on, and we've lost control. We need to gain that control back. And a very minimal number of people should have keys. And then there should be policies in which you know who's got them out, who's returned them. Another thing was computers. Do you have a way of, we need to make sure that those computers, where those are at, our financials, our money, things like that that are kept, that that's behind locked doors. And then when you're not in there, that you lock that door, that you don't allow for someone to just go in. Okay, so that needs to be, those sensitive areas need to be locked up. 6, floor plans. We look at your floor plans. We can have a copy of that on file and, you know, at the police department, which is helpful. So that can be sent to us or your local law enforcement agency. We just kind of go by that along with a walkthrough to just kind of go over with you some vulnerable areas and where you need to make some changes. 7, lighting. Lighting is critical. Lighting changes perceptions, and it also can illuminate. It also can blind you. So what kind of lighting do you need, and what kind of lighting do you have already? We look at those and we give recommendations. We want to make sure that our parking lots are well lit, that you have LED. We recommend LED lighting because all the old lighting is just, it makes everything look yellow, amber, you know, it just distorts everything. We want to make sure there's full coverage. You don't have drastic blackout. Where you come out of the church, you're just blinded. You know, you got a lot of lighting up by the entrances, but then when you leave and you go into the parking lot, it's pitch dark. And especially at night, we don't want to have our parishioners or people who are visiting and coming to something that we're having. We don't want them to feel uncomfortable and unsafe. Okay? So we want to make sure that there's uniformity in our lighting out in our parking lots, and that there's not this drastic change. Okay? So we go over those things with you as well. In the assessment, we give you recommendation using all these principles plus some of the other things. But I wanted to make note that we're all creatures of habit. And some of the recommendations may encourage you to change practices that you have been so used to, and now someone says, now we're going to change things up and we're going to do things differently. And that's not always comfortable. It makes us feel, you know, like, oh man, come on, really? We've been doing this for years. Why do we need to change it now? And so there are some things that you will feel uncomfortable changing, but it's for the, you have to remember, it's for the importance of the safety of these children, these blessed little children that come here, and for everyone else that comes. We want folks to feel safe, and so that's the reason for that. These changes help us stay safer, not in just the house of worship, but these changes can be implemented in your home and in your community. I want everybody to close their eyes. Everybody close your eyes. And I want you to think about, if something happened right now, which door do you go out? Which door? Think about it. Just think about it. Okay? Now open your eyes. Which door would you go out? Gentlemen, the check.
Depends what's happening where.
But which door did it come to your mind immediately when you closed your eyes? Then in the
I
past?
think different than people. Depends what's happening where.
Okay.
And I've been here since I was a little kid, so I know there's a door there, I know there's a door
Okay.
there, another door out there, so I'm not quite the right
Okay.
person to ask.
Anyone else? Yeah.
So I would go out the door I came in because I haven't been here all my life, and I don't know where those other doors are.
Yeah.
What about the kitchen door?
Okay. Anybody else?
Kitchen.
That's good. See, we're thinking outside of what our norm is. Like with her, she's only been here one time or a couple times or whatever, but she thinks about going out that same door, you know, that she came in. And that is our tendency. We have this thought in our head, no matter where we go, whether it's the grocery store or the theater or anywhere else, we always are going to go back out and exit. Even in an emergency, our mind is going to go where I came in. We need to get away from that. We need to, when we walk into another church, another business, restaurant, theater, wherever we go, we need to think about, if there was an emergency at this quick moment, where's my exits? Where's those signs? And that's where you need to start thinking about, that's where I'm headed, okay? When I was thinking about one day, I walked into Fresh Time and I went back there behind, right straight back where the bathrooms are, because that's where they store all the food and everything, and that's where I'm headed out because there's a back door behind that. So I'm always thinking about where I would go have I in a situation where there's an emergency. Thinking that way of, I'm going out that kitchen. Why? Because beyond the kitchen, there's a door that exits into the alley, right? So that's where I'm headed. The whole idea is, for an emergency situation, you need to get out as fast as possible. And so rethinking those habits that we have, because in an emergency situation, you tend to not think, your brain slows down and you're not thinking the way you would want to. So think about that. There's 3 keys that you should focus on. Deterrence, so implement these principles and other security measures. Prevention, be a part of your community. Know your neighbors. In this situation that we're here in this facility, we have no residential neighbors. Well, a few, some apartments here and there scattered. But for the majority, it's just institution and like the hospital, the colleges, so mainly institutions right now, and some businesses. Those are the folks you want to connect with. Whoever is your neighbors adjacent to your facility, your house of worship, make sure you get connected to them. Know them so that they can be your extra eyes when you're not there, okay? They're very critical. They're not just a part of your extra eyes, but they can become a part of your community in your facility. And then maintenance. The third one, maintenance. Keep up on your property, landscaping, exterior, interior. I see some churches I've driven around. I see some churches where the grass is growing up and it's like, you know, it's like you're just drawing attention to vandalism, extra things that will be just an encourager for crime and criminal activity. Okay, stay consistent on your policies, review and remind and be current. Remind folks, especially as you get new people, and be current. Be informed about crime or trends in your area. This can be done through crimemapping.com so that you know you can put in your church address and you can get a radius of a mile. You can do this at your home as well so that you stay involved in knowing what's going on around you, so that you know what you might be up against or what's the trends out there that we need to, like car larcenies are a huge thing with Grand Rapids and everywhere, but making sure that we're locking things down. So that just helps us know, hey, there's having some car larcenies on some properties nearby us. Let's pay attention to that. So maybe we add one more person to walk the parking lot. Lock your doors. There's a church not far from here that had 4 cars broken into and credit cards taken, cash taken out of the console because the cars were locked. So please leave all valuables locked in either on your person or in your home. Do not leave things in your vehicle for people to take with them. You can also call me or local law enforcement to find out more about the crime in your area. Stay connected with other houses of worship through networking. And one resource Brad already gave you is West Michigan security and .org, so it's WMCSN.org. And another one is churchmutual.com. If you want to have some videos or you want more information on different topics, that's a great resource, as well as brotherhoodmutual.com. They're another one that has very good information for all of you. You have a subted report that I did for the church. If there's something specific that you have a question on, I'd be glad to answer it again. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Julie's assessment was enormously helpful to us. Some of you who have been here for many years, John being one of them, recognize that very recently we removed all the massive shrubs out front. Not everybody was happy about that. But Julie had said that the national recommendations are that if something can be hidden behind or under, it needs to be taken out, right? And so the day that we removed those shrubs, what was underneath one of the shrubs? But a box cutter about that long.
Whoa.
Yeah, I was out there helping clean up trash, and there was this box cutter. I'm going like, that's it. That's exactly why we did that, and also it's giving us an opportunity to landscape out front and to admire this beautiful stone wall that abuts the handicap ramp, which is also now visible for the first time in ages. So some of these recommendations are very practical and give us an opportunity to move forward in new and creative ways. So thank you, Julie, for your report. And now we're going to move on to Mike. Please feel free to get up and have some more goodies. We're a couple of minutes ahead of schedule.
Man, I don't know how I'm supposed to follow that. That's amazing information. Maybe I should just get the platters. I'll walk around the street. But man, beautiful. Hey, don't minimize the importance of these two documents and the information that's in them. Take some time, get that cup of coffee, and read through these. There's some very, very good information there. So thanks to both of you for your time and efforts putting that together. So a little bit about this topic real quick before I introduce myself. A lot of us are sitting in this room right now thinking about some of the topics that Brad brought up, and it's a shock of conscience moment. This is a hard discussion to have when we were talking about church, a place of worship, opening our doors to allow people to come in. And all of a sudden we start realizing, are we in times that we have to do things safer, lock doors, maybe ask people who they are? That's hard for the circles that we run in, because that's not how we are wired to have a church run. We want everybody welcome. We want doors open. We want new families. We want to spread the word of God. It is hard for us to have these conversations. So I just want to kind of put that into context for us, because there's some very good work being done on how we can minimize that, but yet make your facilities, your congregations, your sanctuaries very, very safe, considering the circumstances that we're dealing with today. Very, very different times. So a little bit about myself. My name is Mike Wierenga. I am currently a Grand Rapids police officer. I've been in law enforcement for 30 years. I have been extremely blessed in my career to be involved in a lot of training. I was a patrol officer by choice. I never tested for promotion. I loved being in a patrol car. I worked downtown for a lot of years, and then I worked the west side for several years. You don't have any paperwork for me, because I just brought a brochure in the back and a business card, so I can either hand those out or grab them on the way out. So I apologize. I should have put those on the table earlier. That's a little bit about to the rest of what we do. But my career in law enforcement has been awesome. When I got this call, I was excited about it, because I have been in this room many times on Saturday mornings when we're feeding folks. When I was in patrol, and I would just stop in and hang out and have some discussion with a wide variety of personnel that went here, but also people that were coming in here to get something to eat. And listen to people's life stories, if you will. And that's what's so unique about opening doors to allow people in, but sometimes people's life stories can be very challenging if they're going through a crisis that might be right in your front door. So we'll talk a little about that. Done a lot of work in field training, officer work, police department. Currently assigned to our training bureau. I do a ton of work with our new recruits, communication skills, data entry, scenario-based training with them. Do a lot of work with MCOs, who oversees our training for the state of Michigan. And when we get new recruits in-house, they're in our office for 8 weeks. So we spend a lot of time with them, and been very blessed in my career. So I can't thank you guys enough for letting me spend maybe about 20, 25 minutes with you, because I'm kind of curious about some of the questions that are going to be asked. I want to make sure we have an opportunity to do that. A little bit about To the Rescue and how I got started in this line of work was through my love and my passion of teaching and sharing and educating people. Been sent to a wide variety of training programs at the police department that's allowed me to do work internally, but also getting involved with police academies, colleges, churches, townships, city government, and going out and doing additional training on site visits and situational awareness and threat assessment and communication skills. And what is that fancy word, de-escalation, that a lot of people throw around, and have been just blessed to be able to do that. So that's kind of how To the Rescue got started. When we started our program almost 18 years ago, our focus was on first responders, because that was the area where we saw a lot of need that we were doing for both police, fire, EMS, and then that opened up into some different opportunities for government entities. I've done a lot of work with City Hall in Grand Rapids, done a lot of work with Julie. She's called me to do some different events for community members, and I love doing it. I love sharing my stories, my experiences, but also putting the priority of safety. We are living in some really wild times, and I think COVID might have even added a little bit more wilder, or topped maybe a vocabulary double to wilder. It's just unique. We're dealing with some really unique struggles in the community, in the state, in our country, and in this world. And what happens when that starts to happen is people start going through some unique needs, and a lot of times they may be drawn into your facilities. And not always knowing what their background is or what their needs are, they might be bringing some stuff in there that could be potentially dangerous. Whether it's bringing in a family issue or a crisis they're going through, looking for assistance or looking for financial assistance, maybe that's not available, and then they have a different reaction to that. Just very quickly, a story for us with my church recently. We had a carload of 4 people who went to a local casino. When they left the casino, the driver of the car got arrested for drunk driving. 2 of the people in the car had warrants for their arrest, and the 4th individual was trying to walk home. And the first place they walked after about 2.5 hours was in the front door of our church. And they went into the front office and talked to our gal in the front office and just kind of asked her some questions, kind of told her a little bit about what was going on, but he said he needed a ride to Lowell. And when the phone calls were made, you could hear his conversations almost trying to get a hold of somebody where he was trying to go home to, but he was also explaining what just happened with everybody else in the car. And a part of his conversation was he kept wanting money. And he kept wanting money because he was actually trying to get money for some drugs. And this, nothing to do with our church, nothing to do with our facility, but somebody came in looking for that help or that assistance, and it ended up being right in our main office with our gal that works there. So sometimes when we talk about these topics, it may not even have anything to do with your facility. Julie brought up a good point. You're right next to the college here. There are things that could be happening there that could eventually come into this facility through a back door. That's why it's so important to talk about locking doors. We just had an incident within the last week on the west side where we were chasing an individual who was wanted, and he ran into the back door of a business that was open. There was 1 female in that facility. And she ran out the other side and said, hey, somebody just ran in the back door over here, and he was hiding in their kitchen. So sometimes it's things that have nothing to do with you, but are we prepared for that? You know, are we having some conversations in place that if this happens, what can we do? If you're here after hours and somebody gets in the building, what can we do? How do we react to that? What doors can we lock? Where can we go? So I just kind of took a couple notes down kind of to piggyback on some of the discussion that we've already had, but I would say that one of the biggest things that's the most important thing for you to do, every organization, every sanctuary, every team has different needs. So sit down and have a discussion with whoever your leadership team is, whoever that group is, from the top down, and say, okay, what is it that we need? Do we need a safety team? Do we need policies and procedures in place to guide a safety team? Do we want a site visit? Do we want somebody to walk this property with us? Where are our high-risk areas? Where are our low-risk areas? Where are our concerns that we have? What incidents have we had up to this point? Why are we even sitting down having this conversation, and start from there? One of the other aspects of that is figuring out what your needs are, and one of the biggest challenges, and I truly believe this because it is hard for us to wrap our brain around this topic, is the whole terminology, do we have a safety team? Do we have a security team? I don't like those words. Maybe my organization, well, I don't like having a security team. That makes people think that there's a problem here, that we need security. Or somebody said, well, a safety team. Well, then people will come in and say, is this not a safe place? So there's these unique conversations that take place. What can you do to develop? And then get your people some policy, procedure, and train on. Some have changed it to a customer service team. You know, make it a customer service team. And what are you doing to guide that? Some people have called it I added another note that was some of the terminology that they use, service assistance team. You know, so welcoming committee, whatever it is that you want. But now, when you have that terminology, what are you doing to get them trained? And does anybody else in the organization know who they are and what they do? And then I love, like Brad was saying, is it something that you have a shirt or a uniform? Is it maybe just a different color lanyard that you wear than everybody else does? Or is it a pin on a shirt? Or is it some sort of a sticker or a badge? Because a lot of times too, when you get to that point of creating an organization so that we're going to have a security team, there's a lot of different directions you can go with that. Brad is going to be a great resource for you guys in that area. Is it somebody that you want a uniform spot? You want a shirt that says security? You want armed? You want unarmed? If you're going to arm people, a whole other element of policy, a whole other element of training. And that could be a whole afternoon block just on that topic. So what works good for you, and then make the decisions on what you want to do, what you want to train on. So one of the biggest things that we've done with a lot of the training that we've gone into is figuring out, all right, what staff is involved in this. Don't just train your security staff, professional service staff, whatever it is. Who's your full-time staff? Who's the people that are in here on Tuesday nights? Who's here on Saturday mornings? What about the Saturday night service compared to Sunday? Is it anybody that's playing the piano, the organ? Up front, how important it is for you to have the eyes of everything else that's going on in that building. What part of the organization is being trained in that? Making sure that your nursery staff, your team, your youth group, whatever it is, what direction you need to go. Where do you figure out how far you go with some of this training, and what do you do with that? So those are some of the things to look at and how important that is. And then some of the training, just one of the biggest things that a lot of times we will start our training blocks out on is what areas are we failing at? And a lot of times one of the biggest questions will be, it's a mindset that will never happen here. It will never happen here. It will never happen in my organization. And then I'll show you a couple videos where you sit there and think, man, wow. And then you have that complacency component, you don't realize it, but we need to get you thinking about it. I love the fact how you explain the brain and how the brain reacts. I love the answers we got. Where do you think about going out? You're like, hey, I got a lot of options to go out. I've been here before, I've thought of that before, and I couldn't see who it was, but someone else, I've never been here before. I came in the front door, I go out the front door. So those are things that if you don't train on that, or you don't have discussions on that, under high pressure, your brain, there's one little teeny spot in your brain that makes a decision, and if it's never seen or reacted to that before, it won't do anything. That's that whole fight, flight, freeze component. So we'll talk about that and discuss that, because you have to understand what is it that you're going to do. When I met with my team, we had a team meeting here a while back to develop some different programs and some policy and training blocks for some of our team members. And we were sitting in a room with about 8 people, and we got up and said, let's just walk around the facility. And the very first door we went to was locked. And one guy looked at another guy, and one guy did this, and another guy says, why is that locked? And I'm giggling, thinking, okay, this is why we're having these conversations. Because everybody said that door was supposed to be unlocked. It was a door that led out past our congregational area to an outside door to outside the building. It was supposed to be locked from that direction this way. But people that were to go right out of the sanctuary got to a door that was locked. They couldn't get out of the building. So 5 minutes into this discussion, we're like, all right, here we go. This is why we need to have these conversations. And then again, it's different for everyone in this room. It's different at every facility. And there's so many unique different needs for that. So having some of that conversation is very important on where are we going to go, what are we going to start doing with this training. And so we start getting into some of the aspects too of I love how you said everything happens in the parking lot. You know, there's some very great statistics in 65% of incidents at churches are outside. You know, so start looking at what levels of security you need. You know, you got your outer, your inner, and your core. You know, your outer is your parking lot area. People don't think about the events that happen in the parking lot. Then you got your inner. Where's the main doors? What doors are people coming into? Is a lobby area. And then you get into the core part of your building. Are they getting into the sanctuary? Where's that nursery? Where are those things that are a core portion of the building, the majority of the people are at? You know, a lot of times we talk, and we do a lot of training blocks that are specific to situational awareness and threat assessment, but there's a whole other element of active assailant training. That's a different component of that. And one of the biggest things we talk about is if you can't run, hide, or fight, where are your safe rooms? You know, is there a room you can get in that you can lock and nobody else can get in? And if that's not an option, because a lot of times we'll run, hide, fight, we're kind of pick and choosing one or the other. Can it be all three at one time? Maybe I run out that door and I realize there's an incident out there and I can't go that way. So I come back in here and I go hide in that closet, and then I see or hear movement that way, and then I go out a door over there. So it might be run, hide, fight multiple times within one incident. And so we'll discuss some of those things. Some of the security concerns that people have is we a lot of times will jump to that active assailant situation. But there's different things that can happen, whether it's theft or somebody else's problem that ends up in your facility. Again, depending on your location. There could be something at that college that ends up all of a sudden through a back door. So there's a lot of things that can happen. Vandalism in the parking lot. We were having a discussion with some of our team members on a gentleman that was walking through the parking lot with a screwdriver. And the majority of our people on our team thought, well, okay, that's somebody who needs to fix something, or they need to maybe open a car door because it's locked, or they're bringing it to somebody else. But then when we bring it up, are they trying to jimmy a door? Are they trying to break a window? Are they trying to steal a car? And everybody's reaction was, I didn't even think of it that way. They're just kind of understanding what's the concept of the scenario going around us, what's happening that we're seeing, and what can we do to address it. And some of those are discussions that you can have. What is normal? What is normal for your facility is a huge, huge part of that. You know what Saturday night looks like, where people park, where they walk, how they come into the facility. You know what Sunday morning looks like. You know when people pull in the parking lot. What is normal for your congregation to come in, where they park, how they talk, how they walk, how they come in the front door, what doors are they coming in. When something is outside the norm, you have to react to that. That's where a lot of times we fail. We don't realize what's going on. Like, well, that's weird. Why would they park over there? That door hasn't been opened or unlocked in years. But we don't react to what it is that we're seeing. So those are a lot of things, a lot of discussion that we'll have that'll parlay into, okay, what can we do with the information that you have? The other aspect is we don't put a lot of thought into, but the actual, the conflict that people can have. A husband and wife maybe going through some tough times, maybe it's a divorce issue. You talk a lot about kids, and the kids, getting kids taken from a church, child custody issues, things that we don't think about much because everybody's coming into church. Everybody in this room, we all have our own personal struggles. Everyone does. Everyone in your facility does. But sometimes those will get brought into a situation that we may or may not be aware of. And now all of a sudden you've got maybe a custody battle where a dad or a mom is going to get that child out of nursery because it's an area they think they can get in and out of sooner, quicker. Or that domestic happens in the parking lot. Or somebody's gone through that separation or that divorce and has a new person that they're seeing or dating, going to church, and the ex shows up. There's so many variables about the what ifs. What are we doing to prepare for that? And again, this is outside the norm for so many of us to think about these things, because we don't want to bring that thought process in to a church. But in the society that we're living in, we've got to at least have some conversations about it. And that's one of the stuff that we've done today, and just have this information. I applaud you for just taking time out of schedules to think about these things and the work you guys have done. The other aspect too is, we spent some time on active shooter or active assailant. There's a lot of different ways, a lot of variables to go. There is a ton of information that Brad created in that document. Don't minimize how important that is. I think it's huge. And we talked about those other aspects. What happens if somebody gets into that inner core of your church, and now maybe they want to stand up and give their opinion, or the protest component that we see in today's world. I got a riot helmet and a riot shield given to me in 1995 when I was a brand new police officer. And that sat in my locker just down the street here for 26 and a half years. And I think I'll never need that in Grand Rapids. We don't need riot helmets. And I've had that thing out more in the last 3 years than I have in the last 100 years put together. And we are living in some very unique times. So a belief system that somebody really has could come through the door, have some very normal dialogue, get into the core, get inside the organization, and stand up for something they believe in, or have an opinion. And if it's something that's welcome, that's fine. But where are we getting ourselves in a position that, hey, this is outside the norm, or now it's putting other people in jeopardy or danger, or other things that are happening? How are we reacting to that? So those are a lot of the different things that you can talk about and have some discussion with and put into place. One of the things that we do a lot with the programs too is, now when that happens, what team's in place, who's trained to deal with it, And then do we have the ability, whether it's a communication component, I know you both mentioned calling 911. Do not hesitate on how soon you call 911. There is a significant shortage of police officers right now. So that call could be a priority call that is not going to be addressed as quickly as we hope. I do not say that to scare anybody or put fear in you, but the sooner or the earlier you feel the need to call 911, we can always call and cancel. You can always call them back, say we're good, the individual left the sanctuary, he's out in the front yard, he's in the parking lot, and as soon as he went up, we locked the door when he left, or whatever the circumstances might be. So those are a lot of things we talk about. When is the right time to call 911? You know, having those discussions, going through some scenarios, going through some roundtable discussions. The biggest thing we struggle with, and most people in this room and the way we're wired, is we want so hard and so deeply and passionately want to help somebody. And that's how we're all wired. That's why we're in facilities like this with the doors open, bringing everybody in. But then every once in a while, how long do you stay into a situation where you realize, okay, this is becoming dangerous for me or for somebody next to me? We're getting a security team member there. And a lot of times we stay in it too long, or then there's that assaultive behavior or something else that goes south. So those are a lot of things that we talk about, just again to give some different direction to them. Communication skills is a big part of that. Verbal and nonverbal cues. You know, you can see a lot how somebody pulls in that parking lot. You know what normal looks like when they walk in the front door. You know, is it somebody that every day walks in and as soon as maybe there's a greeter, hi, good morning, maybe there's some information there, or they come in a parking lot, they park sideways and leave their door open, and they're walking in and they're coming right down the front alley. That's different behavior. Something's going on, so we need to see that and recognize it. It could be as weird as running up the front door and locking it. It could be is a unique of now maybe you see that behavior and all of a sudden there's some sort of a weapon that comes out where you're yelling at everybody get out the back door or back of the church or whatever it is. So there's some different components that you can do and just putting some different thought processes together with that. Again, not to create fear. We don't want to scare you guys. That's not the intent. It's just we are living in some very, very unique times. I'm going to say it 1,000 times in the next 2 seconds because we have to understand that a lot of this stuff is happening to our places of trust and in church, in schools, in these areas that we would have never ever dreamt of this happening because they are a unique target for that. The other thing just briefly, and I want to open it up because I truly believe there's going to be some questions, especially a lot of the information that they brought up. But the other element that we're seeing, and we're seeing it at such unique levels, is unfortunately how many people are truly struggling with some sort of a mental health crisis. They are truly struggling with some sort of crisis in their life. And I can stand up here and say within my own family, within my own friends, it's very unique times where at one point maybe we would have somebody that was potentially in a facility or a lockdown facility or somewhere where they were being guided and assisted in a controlled environment. And we're seeing so much of somebody that might have been 25 years ago in that type of an assisted facility that is living with mom or dad or unfortunately homeless. They're out in society more frequently, and that is creating more interaction when somebody struggles. And mom and dad don't know what to do, so they call 911. Or the individuals have the freedoms to come and go, or they might be coming into a church service to maybe just try to get themselves in the right direction, and they have some sort of a mental health reaction or emotional outburst because of a medication or because of a drug that they're on or something else that's going on. And the reason I bring that up is we've been spending a lot of time with new police recruits in our city on how are we dealing with this. And the statistical numbers that are out there is we went from about 250 a year to we are having a call for service every hour, every day in our city that has some sort of element of a welfare check or mental health check. And a lot of times that's somebody who is in a mental health crisis. And it's the numbers we're dealing with at least once an hour. And it's putting so many unique pressures on so many organizations that are trying to help people through this. But the reason I bring that up, and I want to end that on how important it is to have some discussions on the topics we talked about today, is because what could happen is now there's a difference between someone that comes into your facility and has a conflict with what's going on in their life or somebody who's actually in a crisis. And again, they may be drawn to your organization because they're looking for some help or some guidance, but they're not making rational decisions. They don't have the ability to process things and make a rational decision as most of us or most normal human beings would be outside of that situation. We could go on a whole nother area with that. We could get John in here and a whole bunch of people and really work more on that. But I just bring that up because it is a very unique time for us to see such an increase in that. And when those type of events are happening, that's where you're going to see an increase of some of the stuff that we talked about today. Does that kind of make sense? Anything to add to that? Okay. So again, I can't thank you guys enough for letting me come in and chat with you. I know that they've got a lot of stuff that they presented. We do a lot of opportunity to come out and do training with you and your staff. There's a lot of things that's kind of the same concept that these two have brought up too. Whether we sit with you or we walk your facility, myself, I got 2 other team members that will come and spend time on your property and start out with just a conversation and then say, okay, now we'll start to develop a team and now let's do some training with your team. Because one of the things you don't want to do is just start doing training, because if you're doing that before you sit down and do a slow, methodical decision making, you might not be giving them the right tools that they need. So start conversation. Have that conversation. See what your unique needs are. Have those meetings. Get the right people involved. Utilize this resource here. There's a ton of good stuff in there on the policy procedure. Get a team developed. Figure out who works good on that team. Kind of get an idea what you're going to call it. It's going to be different. Everybody has a different opinion or a different thought process on that. And then do some training. Kind of do it in that slow, methodical order. So that's just a little bit of kind of about what we do. And again, I'd like to open it up for questions. So that I learned some stuff sitting here listening to these two, and I'm sure there's got to be questions that you guys have on this whole concept. So turn it back over to you.
Sure. I want to follow up with a little bit on what Mike said in terms of what we're seeing in terms of mental illness. The gentleman who did the damage in the garden happens to have been described by the police officers who came as someone who is known to be schizophrenic and not on his meds. That same individual was denied a 3rd serving at Breakfast Cafe the week before. And then he came on a Tuesday night, got through the fence, did all of that damage, and unfortunately we didn't have a second camera of the actual damage being done. However, Megan was able to see on one of the video cameras that when he was walking down the AT&T lot, he had some kind of a metal weapon or something in his left hand. So I can't stress that enough about mental illness is rampant in all communities today, and people are not necessarily rational and would not normally do some of the things that we're actually seeing. A couple of years ago, some of you were here when a gentleman, young guy, handsome guy, ripped down the God is Love banner twice from the balcony. I encountered him 1 week out in the foyer, fortunately. However, 2 weeks later, he came into the sanctuary yelling obscenities and all kinds of things about the LGBTQ community, for which we stand here at St. Mark's solidly, and had to be wrestled to the ground. Police came, and he was taken away. So we also know that if people can be killed in a small little Baptist church in the middle of Texas, they can certainly be killed at St. Mark's or someplace else. So again, you might think that these things can't happen, but they are happening, and they do happen. And it isn't to scare people, it's just to say that all 3 of these presentations are to what can we do to mitigate harm to our community. That's the most important thing. And so as many changes as we have actually made here at St. Mark's, all kinds of new lighting. Someone recently said to me, geez, what's all this lighting? You're using all this lighting, electricity at night. Well, we've illuminated this building. The whole building is illuminated at night, and all on timers until about 2 o'clock, I think, in the morning. But anyway, to help protect this property. Same thing with the parking lot. We install additional lighting in the parking lot so that no one can leave. And we have another policy that no one person is supposed to go into the parking lot alone after a meeting at night. It's 2 people at the same time. So just little things to underscore the presentation. So let's questions, please. And identify yourself if you would. You should put it on there. Yes.
Yeah, this has been excellent, but you just hit upon a major thing about our parking lot, and that is the students. Do they understand that they can't go out just one at a time? That, I mean, that's a big responsibility that we have.
Yeah, so during the week, we rent out the parking facility. It's a major source of income for us, and we need it desperately. We work very closely with Kendall, and actually Pam works with Kendall, and it's a good point. You know, we should probably contact the Kendall folks to say, you know, how are you helping to protect your students even though they're on our property? There's a camera there. There will be an additional camera there installed. They're all on order. They're coming, I think, next week. So there'll be more surveillance. We have signs and various, might put the signs up. Several different places that say surveillance cameras are on duty. And Megan has access, Megan and Pam and who else? And John, right? All have access to that footage on cameras. And I can't stress the cameras more, honestly. You're on candid camera right now, by the way. The camera's right there. There's another one in the kitchen. There's
Supposed to
another one in the
reveal
foyer.
location of the camera. Did you not listen to the
I think this is the same bunch. But you would not have even known that that was there if I hadn't pointed it out, right? Questions? Jim?
Yeah, I'm Jim Lozer from St. Mark's. I was just curious, Christian, some facilities have like a lockbox outside for the police and the fire to get in if there's nobody here. Do we have that, or is that something that?
We did talk about that, I think, in one of our meetings, and we have not done that.
I actually called the fire department, but they've never returned my call, so get one.
Is that still recommended to have, you know, in terms of safety issues? Because somebody could break into it, get their key to get in.
Yeah.
Well, you know, and most of those are set up and designed that are either embedded into concrete or they're thick metal.
Yeah.
But that is generally a fire department requested issue if there's a certain type of need within this facility that they would have to get into. Otherwise, kind of how this facility is set up, unfortunately, they'll probably just use forced entry at a door.
Yeah, use an axe.
You know, they'll get in.
They'll break.
But there's certain elements of certain businesses that, whether it's that heavy steel door or there's harder access points, they'll utilize those lock boxes. Or a lot of times it will be it's probably in a residential area as well, like a high-rise apartment building or whatnot.
Mike?
Mike, does GRPD have that same key set?
The only ones that do that will be our SWAT team.
Yeah.
On our SWAT team,
Okay.
on certain locations again. Generally those lock boxes, and if you have any more to add to this, generally those are very heavy in the fire service.
Right.
It's not very often
As
long.
you say, the fire department will get in really
Yeah,
fast.
yeah, they'll get some cool tools out, they'll get in. But there are some key-coded accesses of those lock boxes that are shared with our SWAT team commander, I believe. You've got anything to add to that? Site-specific for a lot of those.
You know, St. Mark's has for a very long time had a fairly sophisticated alarm system. You know, it's engaged in the kitchen, but it covers the entire building. So we've updated that. John has access to that. So if the doors that are supposed to be locked, that are alarmed, are not locked, the last thing in the world I like to see is that it's 9:30 p.m. and I'm going to set the alarm and I can't because there's a door ajar someplace. Again, I think that to underscore what was said, doors to rooms that are not occupied need to be locked. We've gotten very good at that, I think, here. But once in a while, I'll go down to the lower level room and the door will be unlocked. So that's really, really important. And why is that important? Because if somebody's running through the building, you don't want them to have access to a place to hide, right? And so we have, okay, so I'll shut up.
Well, that's a good point too, and I don't know if either one want to add to the active shooter component. There's very good studies and very good information on when we go back and the FBI does their study on active shooter incidents locked doors change the entire fluid movement of an active shooter. It is significant, where, I mean, they might be coming through a facility, and if they're just checking a door, that door, if they're finding a bunch of locked doors, they're gonna move on or move out. So it is so important on locked doors. Brad, I don't know if you got any of this, the swipe cards. We'll go out and do site assessments, and people have everything in place, but they have the doors. Rock, open the door open. I mean, we can only do so much, but it will slow the flow of an active shooter down if we've got doors that are locked, or they'll vacate and go somewhere else. So it is so important to have that. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to that.
I do want to say that one of our houses on the north end, I just had done a septet assessment. A week later, they had an evening meeting with some people. They left, it was getting kind of stuffy in there, so they opened up the back door that faced the woods. The one time, we always have to think about that one, it's going to be that one time he did it. Someone walked in, pretended to be something that they weren't, and so they had to shut down that particular, because they said, we set a policy up now that if this happens and you prop a door open and someone comes in or something happens and we know about it, you will no longer be doing your Bible study or whatever the case was. So that is really, that one time, that's all it takes. So it's very important to follow the rules for that reason.
You know, and again, that makes it very challenging for a lot of us, for our facilities, because we want to have that open door, inviting environment. And it's hard to come up with the right way that we can funnel people through the proper door of your facility. Now, going out will be different, because we gotta get out, we gotta get out. And as sad as that door propping is, there's some very unique information coming out of one of our last horrific shootings in this country, and entry was made by a door that was propped. So it's
Another recommendation that came from working with Brad and Julie is that we, 15 minutes into every service, the doors are locked. The security guard, Jamie, who was our security guard, one of our 2 on Sunday, is at that door, interrogates anybody that wants to come in. That's a national recommendation that once the service begins and most people are in, although Episcopalians are notorious for being late, but we start on time here. But anyway, the doors do get locked, and I think that's a really important thing too. No matter what the event is. Like our doors, we had a discussion before Jamie and I talked about, okay, this begins at 10:15. At 10:45, the doors were locked. Right, so, and he's been here the entire time. We're blessed here to be able to have professional security. 2 people now on Sunday morning, so one is outside walking around, Jamie's at the front door. But we also instituted a couple of years ago a welcome ministry and a greeters ministry in the foyer. So anybody coming into the building is also greeted by a greeter and then also welcomed. And then if they are visitors, they are asked to sign in. And we also send them a little note after, if we get them actually to sign in. So again, greeters, ushers, first line of defense. Right? If they see something that's odd or strange, or deal with somebody that's got a backpack or a suitcase of some kind, we do have a policy here. It's not actually posted yet, but we do have a policy that backpacks and suitcases cannot come into the sanctuary.
Yeah, it should be posted.
That's a hard sell for some people, because for some people, everything they own is in that backpack or that suitcase, and they're reticent to let go of it. However, it's really, really important. And when I see a backpack in the church and I was encouraged by what Mike said, that, with the altar at the crossing now, those of Jan at the altar, we can see the entire space, which we could not do at the high altar, right? So now we are front and center, and we have to keep an eye out, and believe me, I do. I'll tell this quick little story. At my previous parish, my deacon said to me during the consecration, said, "There's a guy here who wants to talk to you." Now that was fairly common in Central Square, Cambridge, Massachusetts, people from the street. And I said, oh, because at the back of the church was a fairly large space. In the middle aisle was a guy that was... And And I said to the deacon, is that the guy? He said, no, that's another one. So at any rate, yeah, so you have to be vigilant. The ushers are another first line of defense. We can't stress the usher's role. More importantly, because the ushers are typically in the north transept, that is the entrance into the church. We closed our front entrance 2 years ago. Unfortunately, because the beauty of that building is not from the north transept, it's from the front of the church. But we can't, but the national recommendation is one entrance, so we did do that. So other questions? Yes?
My name is Wierenga. I'm from South Sudanese, and I go to Grace Episcopal Church. This is my second time to attend the training, and I think this time is even much more information than what I had before. I'm the Diocese person at the Sudanese Grace. Talking about locking the doors and how people can't come on time. It's one of the problems that we have. I try my best sometimes to wipe the door and lock it, but even before 10 minutes to the end of the service, people show up. And I have little kids sometimes, and they saw me, they want to be with me, so I can't go to the door. So what do I have to do? I know you have to lock it, but still people are coming in and out and all of that, and I'm having a hard time. How do I keep those people segregated?
So I'll just jump in. One of the things you might do is to say, have a backup person. So if you have to leave your post, then somebody's there, and that person could have another person. Or if somebody's standing there, or you're standing there, you have to deal with a child issue. Just say to somebody that you know and trust, I need you to stay open on this door.
Okay, I'll try to do that, but the problem is too, we don't have enough people that are willing to do that. And I don't want to be like, and sometimes it's okay to have somebody another day, not me all the time. Not that I don't want to do it, but at the same time, we want also to.
So again, I think we get back to something that we've talked about that we do not really have here, and that is a safety team. But if there's a team of individuals, that have come together, that know all of these protocols and procedures, then those people can also be enlisted to help guard the door.
I would encourage for your particular house of worship to have people come and speak to them directly. Just to show the urgency and the need.
Thank you.
And then that way, and you can be there as a support to say, yes, we need you folks to see the urgency of this. And then when they have someone, because it's one thing when you're trying to tell the story or tell how it should go, and they're just like, well, I'm not really seeing it, But if you have people come and help support you in what you want to see, your vision for what you want to see happen there, we can help support that.
Thank you.
Folks like us.
And like I said, in my community, we have so many issues that based on the gender, which is it never happened yet, but I can see it will happen. So we have people that are separated together sometimes, and they can't get together. But if they know so and so goes there, and they want to talk to them or whatever, something like that will happen. So in my mind, I'm thinking what I need to do. And thank you. I think I'm going to put together. I'm going to talk to my director, see what we can do, and then I can invite you. And with the training that I have, I'm going to work on it also what I need to do. So thank you.
Thank you.
I have a point to that. Well, I was talking to one of the other administrators over at North Park, and they locked their doors. And there was somebody who showed up that this person who was assigned would recognize kind of who their parishioners were. They knew it wasn't somebody that they knew. And they said, I'm sorry, you're welcome to come, but you need to come earlier next Sunday. And if we had this implemented, when that gentleman ripped down the banner and came in, and thank goodness he didn't have a weapon or completely go any further on. But had we had this implemented at that point in time, because he came well into the worship service, which is usually when people come in and want to kind of shock everybody and make something happen. He would have not been able to get in our building because Jamie would have stopped him. So it is really important that doors are locked. and that somebody is assigned, like Jamie, who recognizes our commissioner. So, you know, if he saw Margaret coming, he'd be like, oh, hi, Margaret, sorry you're a little late, come on in. But if somebody, if you don't recognize, I mean, like in the case in North Park, they said, I'm sorry, this is a policy of ours, and we just need you to not come in.
Thank you. Thank you. Wendy?
Do we already have a security team like I'm a reader, so
We do not.
I'm getting scared now, but
We have a security, we have a safety ministry team, but we don't have a team, the kind of team that we've been talking
So,
about. And we recognize that.
we don't have somebody in the church like
Correct. We do not.
to help if something happens. We don't have that right now.
This is one of the reasons why we now have 2 security people. Okay. Yes, Sue?
I just wanted to put in a request, actually, that we have a session like this for de-escalating. And this speaks a little bit to your comments about the increased number of people who seem to be having some sort of mental health crisis. But I think in the case, and we keep bringing this up as an example, but to the individual who broke the sculptures in the garden, that if on Saturday, maybe if we had de-escalated, maybe he wouldn't have been so angry. This happens a lot, and I think it's a really, a very good technique to have. It takes some learning, so, yeah.
And one of the things that's unique about that topic is understanding the difference between somebody who's actually in a conflict, either with you or the facility or somebody else, and somebody who is in a mental health crisis. There is a difference. And sometimes we may not be able to communicate with somebody in a crisis where it is an immediate 911 call. So there's some very good points on the 2 components of how we can talk.
We did have John Riley with us about a year ago, or I don't remember how it was. And he did do de-escalation training. I think to Sue's point, particularly with the Breakfast Cafe ministry and that group of people, for our neighbors. For the Breakfast Cafe teams, we have 5 Breakfast Cafe teams. Specific targeted training for those 5, I think would be really, really helpful and also mandatory. You know, because it can't just be Kathy Stevens or Judy Freeman or a couple of different people. It really needs to be, the teams need to be, and because we're seeing more challenging situations now than we have in the past. Yep.
We got a couple questions.
Okay. Oh, yes, Milton.
You got half of my question. Unfortunate reality is a lot of schools with young kids are now having active shooter drills to know what to do. So you just mentioned half of it, which is de-escalation training at Kids Cafe. Can we also have a live session for Sunday during service so that if something happens, we know what to do and practice it? Because we're not going to remember these 75 pages that we read today. So this is great for background, but what do we actually do?
And that point is really, really well taken. And I can't tell you how many times I've, in my own head, stood up in front of the congregation and said, make sure you're paying attention to all of the illuminated exits, where you're, all these other kinds of things. We have, where's Jeff? We have very much talked about what to do if there was a situation. We know to lock doors, and we know interior spaces, all of those things we know. We also know that the children are to be taken out that back staircase, if at all possible, and whatever the name of that, what's the name of that park that's down in the corner. Anyway, that's where the children are to be taken. That's actually part of our protocols. But we have yet to tell parents, don't go get your children. The children will be over there. They will be safe. The last thing you want, if I'm not mistaken, you don't want parents running around the building where there's an active emergency situation and looking for their children when their children are not even in the space, right? So we do have that procedure. We have not had practice, however, or a drill, like a fire drill. We have not had that.
And I would amend this slightly. So you said we,
Staff.
So the question, yes,
Staff.
so you've got staff,
Yeah.
but you also have ushers. There are a lot of us, and we aren't sure what to do. So I think that's where I'm looking for spreading it, not the whole congregation. You can't get all 235 dues-paying members in an active training, but select numbers that, because people are going to look, no, what do I do? There's an emergency. Tom, what do I do? So I think there's a select group that is critical to get into this to help.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I have
You know, one of the things, that I was thinking about this earlier, you know, a couple of years ago, we removed a pew in the center of the very long nave, something like 25 pews on both sides, all of which have a center barrier, right? So we removed, believe it or not, the primary reason for removing those two pews, safety. So that people could get out of that space more quickly, either that way or this way. So a lot of the things that we have been doing have had practical implications. But your point is well taken. We haven't had an emergency situation drill a protocol. The protocols are there, we just haven't really done it yet. So as I said early on, there are any number of things that we at St. Mark's have yet to do. Yeah, cool.
Just to dovetail off of what you were saying, Sue, I think it is very important that we get de-escalation training, but it's also important, like was mentioned, to learn when to call 911. When I had talked to the Grand Rapids Police Department the third time after the incident with this gentleman, we were on another incident, but they came in and we were talking about this guy who was schizophrenic, who did the damage in our garden. And they said there's no reasoning with this individual when he's off his meds. He is bona fide, he's not to be reasoned with, and he escalates crazy. They said if he shows up, because we found out that he was served breakfast a couple times afterwards, if he shows up, call 911. So, you know, here is the police department telling us you made a bad choice. You can't de-escalate this guy or invite him into your building. You need to call 911. And I think we do all need, myself included, to learn how to de-escalate somebody that is really upset. However, with that being said, I think we also need to make really good choices on when it's appropriate to call 911. I hate to call 911 myself, but we've done that a few times in the last month.
I'll just say to that sadness, you expressed it, Tom has said it, Judy, is that this gentleman that we've talked about several times is not somewhere where he can be treated when he's just wandering the streets, and we are really concerned about his safety, because at some point he will be a statistic.
Lastly, we do need to stop that because we're just past it, and probably because of me. But at any rate, we are installing, and I think it's now installed, but not fully operational, a new doorbell system. We had a Ring doorbell before. The new doorbell system has not only an intercom, but also a camera on it. When that is fully functional, we will, unfortunately, during the week, we will lock both the glass doors, which of course we always keep locked anyway, and we will also lock the wooden doors. Pam will be able to communicate with that, whoever's at the door, and so will Megan. Just another unfortunate thing that we have to do. Catherine, one last thing.
Okay, I just have one question about the keys, because I know they can be a huge problem with so many out there. I don't know if this would work for an institution, but for home use, we have a key code that we can change and deactivate for certain people. We have one code for the neighbours. If the neighbours were to move, we would deactivate it, give a different code to the new neighbours.
We have talked about that. We've talked about, you know, for that, and it's a relatively expensive process, I think. Right?
Is it?
Yeah, but it makes more sense than for Pam and Megan having to continue to track codes. I remember in my previous church, we decided we would change all the locks on the entire building to the tune of something like $5,000, which we didn't do, by the way, in part because St. Peter's was built in 1867. Its wooden doors were this thick. You can't do a cylinder. I mean, it was just absolutely crazy, but that's a point well taken. We have talked about, I think it came up in one of our training sessions, that a card key access is safer, and because those cards can actually be deactivated. So something for us to think about. Yes, one more question about Val.
Just a real quick question. I'm Val Ambrose, and I'm here on behalf of Old Diocese. I want to thank you for this workshop. For each of our presenters, this was incredible information that will be useful in so many congregations. The question I have is, I know it's live streamed, but will there be videos available, or
Yes,
will it
it will
continue to be
also,
on your Facebook?
it will also be recorded.
Okay,
So I mean, it's there.
It's available. Thank you so much.
Yeah, John?
Real quick, just Mike, you deal with these things. The de-escalation is obviously a goal, but how, when you're talking with this gentleman here who's like schizophrenic, he'll be committed someplace, they'll put him on his meds, he'll be acting normally, he'll be released, and he'll go back off his meds again. And that, I think that's a greater societal issue, but I do think people need to try and recognize, and I don't know how you do this from experience, that you can't de-escalate everybody.
Right.
You know, there are people out there that are, and I use the word crazy too, but they are in a state of mind that you are not going to reason.
The problem with the word de-escalation is people do not understand what that word means. They don't know what it means. So people, you'll see the news say it, you'll say we need to de-escalate this, it's not that easy. You cannot de-escalate every single situation. You cannot do it. So when people use that word, they think it's an answer, but what it is communication skills with behavioral change. And if you can talk to somebody and see a behavioral change in a positive way, you keep talking to them. If you get a negative behavioral change, you need to figure out what the next step is, and that might be calling 911.
I think pick it up immediately for this group goes to 911.
Absolutely.
What was
Absolutely.
really fascinating when John Riley was with us at the last session was never say to someone, calm down. Because it has the exact opposite effect. Yeah, so we did learn some lessons. So let us pray together. The Lord, before we forget, we don't want to send everybody away without some kind of nourishment. There's cheese, crackers, and other things up there. So please feel free to stay and have some goodies and be with our. Thank you so much. The Lord be with you. Gracious God, you call us into relationship with you and with one another. We do our best to be kind and gentle, but we also recognize that at times we have to be firm and stern. We ask you to bless us as we go our separate ways, and whatever parish, both here present today or online in the future, help us all understand the role of safety and security in our houses of worship, and give us the strength and the goodwill and the wisdom to put those policies into effective practice. Guide us and lead us as always through the power of your Holy Spirit. Bless our worship tomorrow and keep us all safe from harm. In Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, everybody. Please feel free to.
I did not give you my business card. If you have questions, you can send me an email. They're on that back table back there.